Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at amantadine.
Okay.
From the information you gave me, I have found it really fascinating how it's one substance, but it has these two seemingly very different roles in the body.
Yeah.
Our goal today is to sort of unpack this,
Right.
figure out what makes amantadine so versatile, and I guess what the key takeaways for you are for our listeners.
Yeah, I think the thing that is so intriguing about amantadine from the outset is just its structure.
Okay.
It's built around what we call an adamantane core, and so you can kind of picture that as like a very stable, three-dimensional cage-like arrangement of carbon atoms.
I see.
The chemical name is 1-adamantanamine hydrochloride, but we'll just call it amantadine for ease.
Sounds good.
But that rigid cage-like structure is really key because it allows amantadine to kind of fit into specific sites on proteins in the body, much like a key in a lock.
Okay.
And that's what underlies its very different actions.
So let's look at those actions.
Sure.
Your materials highlight its use against the flu and then also in treating Parkinson's disease,
Right.
which that's quite a jump.
It is, yeah. So let's first consider its antiviral role against influenza A.
Okay.
So amantadine targets what's called the M2 protein on the influenza A virus. And you can think of this M2 protein as like a tiny channel that the virus needs to open up
Okay.
to release its genetic material inside our cells in order to replicate. And so amantadine basically steps in and blocks this channel.
Okay, so it can't replicate.
Right. It stops the virus's reproduction cycle.
I see. So why isn't this the go-to flu treatment that we hear about all the time?
Right. Well, that's a prime example of how viruses can really outsmart us.
Yeah.
So influenza A is very, very prone to mutations. And so it quickly developed changes in its M2 protein that meant that amantadine could no longer bind effectively.
So it found a workaround.
It found a workaround, exactly. And so this rapid resistance is why amantadine isn't really widely used as an antiviral today.
Wow. It's a constant arms race, I guess, with these pathogens.
It is, absolutely.
Now that's a really important point to bring up, too, just how quickly these viruses can adapt. But so let's switch gears now to the Parkinson's.
Okay.
How does this same molecule help with a completely different condition?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. So in Parkinson's disease, there's a loss of brain cells that produce dopamine.
Okay.
And dopamine is this really crucial chemical messenger for movement. So amantadine kind of steps in with several actions to try and boost the remaining dopamine activity that's there.
Okay.
So it can help to release more dopamine from those remaining brain cells. It can slow down dopamine's reabsorption, so it kind of stays active longer.
Okay.
And there's even some evidence that it might directly stimulate the receptors that dopamine acts on.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of working on multiple levels there.
So it's tackling this shortage from many different angles.
Exactly. And in addition to that, it also has some WIT effects on some other brain receptors called NMDA and sigma receptors.
Oh, okay.
And these might also contribute to its benefits.
I see. And I know your notes mention that it helps with specific Parkinson's symptoms as well.
Right. So it can really help reduce bradykinesia, which is that slowness of movement, as well as stiffness and tremor. And it's also actually used to manage a side effect of long-term levodopa treatment.
Oh, okay.
So levodopa is one of the gold standard treatments for Parkinson's. But with long-term use, people can develop these involuntary movements called dyskinesias.
Oh, wow.
And so amantadine can actually help manage those as well.
So we have these two kind of seemingly unrelated uses.
Right.
So how does the body actually handle amantadine once you take it? What's the process?
So it's absorbed well when taken by mouth, and it distributes widely throughout the body, importantly crossing into the brain, which is obviously crucial for its effects in Parkinson's disease.
Yeah.
Interestingly, it doesn't undergo much breakdown by the liver, and it's mainly eliminated by the kidneys.
Okay.
So this means that for individuals with kidney problems, the dosage needs to be adjusted.
That's a critical consideration.
Absolutely.
Now, like all medications, of course, there are potential side effects.
Of course.
And you should always consult your doctor about these things. But what are some of the main things that someone taking amantadine might experience?
Right. Well, we can kind of categorize them.
Go.
So neurologically, some individuals might experience drowsiness, insomnia, dizziness, anxiety, confusion, even hallucinations in rare cases.
Wow.
Less commonly, seizures can occur.
Okay.
There can also be what we call anticholinergic side effects, things like dry mouth, constipation, difficulty urinating, blurred vision.
Hmm.
Cardiovascular side effects might include a drop in blood pressure when standing up, which is called orthostatic hypotension,
Right.
and swelling in the legs or ankles.
Okay.
And then there's a kind of a skin-related side effect called levato reticularis, which is a purplish net-like rash.
My goodness. So, I mean, a lot of those sound like they could be attributed to its effects on brain chemistry.
Yeah, exactly, because it does affect the way certain chemicals are working in the brain.
Right. So it sounds like given all of this, its main role in medicine has definitely kind of evolved over time.
Precisely. Due to that widespread resistance that we talked about, amantidine's primary use now is really in treating Parkinson's disease
Okay.
and managing those levodopa-induced involuntary movements.
That's where it's really found its place.
Exactly. Its antiviral use is very limited these days.
Okay, so let's kind of synthesize all this then.
Okay.
We have this single molecule with this really unique structure, this cage-like structure,
Right.
which initially had a significant impact on, a viral infection,
Mm-hmm.
but now plays a very key role in managing a neurodegenerative condition.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like the virus's ability to rapidly evolve is really what limited its first application.
Yeah, and that highlights, I think, a really fundamental challenge in pharmacology, this constant need to adapt to evolving pathogens. It's a reminder that even effective drugs can have a limited window of use in infectious diseases due to resistance.
Yeah, and something we always have to be thinking about.
Absolutely.
And then in Parkinson's, we see it kind of working through multiple mechanisms to ease symptoms.
Right.
Which really underscores just the complex nature of treating neurological disorders, where often influencing multiple pathways is more effective than just a single target.
Exactly. It demonstrates that in complex conditions, a multi-pronged approach often yields the best results.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive into amantadine. It really makes you think. Considering how one drug can interact with such seemingly different biological systems, what does this tell us about the potential that might be out there within the vast library of known molecules that we already have? Perhaps future medical breakthroughs are already sitting on pharmacy shelves waiting for us to discover their hidden talents. Thanks for exploring this with me,
My pleasure.
and thanks for listening.